You guys, I am so excited to welcome Sarah to the podcast, and I'm going to let her tell you all about herself. And I'm just so thrilled that I discovered her through one of her products. So, Sarah, welcome to the show and tell us who you are and what you do.
Tara, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on your podcast and really excited to talk to people specifically who are interested in how kids with autism, kids who are neurodivergent, are learning and how we can help with that. My name is Sarah Habib. For those that don't know me, I am the founder of the Calm Caterpillar. Our mission is to equip kids with the skills to handle life's tough emotions, no matter where they are, whether they're at home or at school. Everything we teach, whether in a classroom or through our products in our home, is all about equipping kids with the skills to take with them on the go, right? We want them to have them in this imaginary toolkit, and no matter where they are, they can get them out and they can use them. We started our program with Cincinnati Public Schools. Cincinnati Public Schools is a Title I school district here in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I live. They have a preschool program that serves 2,200 kids a week, and they have autism classrooms as well, in addition to inclusion and neurotypical classrooms. During the pandemic, we realized that we were providing a movement mindfulness program to a lot of these kids virtually. And we said to ourselves, wait a second, we've never tackled the home. And if we're not going to tackle the home, no matter what we do in school, we're not going to see the change that we're expecting. And so that is really the moment that Calm Caterpillar was born. We said we're going to send home kits to families in Cincinnati Public Schools so that they can equip themselves with the same skills and the same materials that's inside the preschool classroom. So 3 years ago now, we sent home 2,200 Calm Corner kits to every single preschooler in Cincinnati Public School.
Oh
All of
my
those parents
gosh.
got a meditation cushion, a breathing ball, a parent guide, and a hand breathing poster. And on top of that, we texted them twice a week for the entire school year. Because you know what? When you hand parents or caregivers, grandparents, who's ever at home, a book, it was a 15-page book, the likelihood that it's read is not always high. And so we said to ourselves, we need to meet people where they are. And people are on their phones. So we said we're going to text them. We took the information in the book, we distilled it into 240 to 300 character texts, and we sent them twice a week. We asked questions and we asked people to check in. We actually had an 86% response rate on parents responding to our texts from our program. So, my first takeaway for everyone here is like, for schools who are looking to communicate with parents, texting is the number one way to reach them. So we did that program, and then we measured the success of those students' behavior, both pre and post. We saw a reduction in classroom disruptions and an increase in pro-social skills based off the DECA.
Wow.
So we know that when we create symmetry between what's going on in school and what's going on at home, which is one, creating consistency where kids who are neurodivergent thrive, as well as kids who are neurotypical thrive. We're creating consistency, and then we're equipping caregivers with the skills to match structure around how to handle emotions in the same way a teacher is. We're again creating that consistency, which allows children the opportunity to practice these skills at a much faster rate. We know through the motor learning theory model that we need to practice something 1,000 times before it becomes cognitive. If we were only practicing at school, it would take us twice as long. So now we've doubled our dosage by allowing kids to practice at both home and school. We've equipped parents and caregivers with really important skills to help manage kids' feelings. And we've created this consistency. So that is how the Calm Caterpillar started, right? We were really focusing in on how we could create this consistency and use Calm Corner kits as a way to move the needle for classroom behavior. From that, we created some weighted soft plush, right? We moved into Call Me the Caterpillar, which is our weighted soft plush that goes
Mm.
around your neck, just like this.
Oh
And
my
it
gosh.
is
That's so cute.
sensory soothing because it's lightly weighted. And what's really special about Calm Me is we wanted to create the same physical feel as a breathing ball. So it has an interelastic core. So it
Oh.
literally mimics a breathing ball, which I don't have on me. I apologize. But so it's creating that same feeling. Because, when we talk about breathing and preschool students in particular, It's kind of a tough concept. What even is your breath? What is breathing? And I personally find that a breathing ball is one of the most effective ways to show kids what a breath looks like, how it feels in your body. So we said to ourselves, great, Calm is working really well. But we were getting all this feedback because we teach 5 core breathing techniques in classrooms to both caregivers and to educators that kids need tactile, hands on, fully immersive ways to practice this nebulous thing called breathing. And that is how and why we created Bloomy. So Bloomy really was born from some autism teachers telling us that kids who were neurodivergent needed a different way to do flower and candle, that they couldn't visualize flower and candle that maybe some of the way neurotypical kids were. So what we do here is we smell the flower, we push the flower through, the flame pops up and we blow it out. And what's great is we combined a fidget tool, right? You're able to use your hand, you're able to fidget, and you're also able to incorporate a breathing technique. And so we have found that in both neurotypical and neurodivergent classrooms, especially for kids, I would say 18 months to 10 years old, this is changing the game when it comes to learning how to use a breathing technique. What's also special about it is if it were in a calm corner in your home, is that it doesn't require parental help once you have the strength to push this through, right? An 18-month-old can't be using this in the same way. Still really effective to teach it to them, right? Because they understand smelling a flower and blowing out a candle, right? So you can be teaching the breathing technique. But once a child can begin to do this on its own, that's when we notice that we're reducing disruptions.
Mm.
And everything we want to do is equip kids with the skills to do this on their own, right? Because eventually we'll all become adults and we have to learn how to manage our feelings. And so we think, especially when this is in a calm corner in a classroom, and a child can self-select to go use the tool, change how they're feeling, and rejoin the class, we have allowed that teacher to continue teaching. We've equipped that child with the skills to manage their feelings on their own. It's a win-win all around, and the same thing applies at home.
I love this, Sarah, because that tool, the Bloomy, is what
Yeah.
helped me find you. And I was
Yeah.
so curious, like, what else does she have? Because this was so perfect for, like you said, the kids that a lot of times we'll put our finger up. Okay, smell the flower, blow out the candle. And it's a great concept, but that makes it even more concrete, more fun, and you can hold something anytime
Yeah.
our students can hold something. It's super wonderful. And I think the great thing, like you said, about using something like this at school and at home, it creates a predictable routine. And I talk about predictable routines with my members all the time. That's how we create independence. That's how we reduce, I think, some of those behaviors. You
Mhm.
create a predictable routine and it just becomes automatic instead of having to talk them through and teach things. So if they've learned how to use the Bloomy and they see one in a calming corner, they could pick it up and start just doing it on their own because it's the predictable routine.
100%. And then with for some kids, both neurotypical and neurodivergent, right? After doing this 1,000 times, if they didn't have access to it, they're still then able to begin to recall, wait a second, what's that thing I do? Can I begin to use my imagination, right? And we want to help kids. Sometimes you need a tool at first in order to be
Yeah.
able to do it on your own independently. So I don't want to lose sight of that, right? Because I hope that when this kid is 12 years old and they're feeling something really intense, that they remember how to use this, even if it's not in their pocket.
That's a great point. Really great point. Oh my gosh, I'm just so impressed by everything you've done starting out with helping Cincinnati Public Schools and then expanding and finding these other tools. And I can't wait to dive in and learn even more because I didn't know that your weighted caterpillar could also stretch. So that's another huge one because anytime we can involve body movement, I feel
Yeah.
like, and then those little weighted things like in my classroom when I was at the early childhood level for 10 years, anything that was slightly weighted that they could be on their lap or on their shoulders was really popular. Bigger weighted blankets are
Yeah.
great, but not at group time or circle time. It has to be, and then those, they're going to
Oh,
be attracted to them based on what they look like.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
this
what's
is
that
Rory,
one
by the way.
cute?
I just didn't know if you knew about Rory. So Rory is
Oh,
special in that. So, right. So Call Me has that interelastic core and stretches. Rory, we did a voice box because we were again thinking about how can we reduce disruption in classroom? How can we give kids the skills to do something on their own? So Rory actually guides you through lion's breath. So the first time he roars, like,
All right, for those of you that are not watching this on YouTube and seeing what Sarah's doing, if you're listening on the podcast, she's listening to what she pressed a button. And what is the lion telling you to do?
the lion tells you to take a big deep breath in and then roar out. It goes when if you're feeling mad or sad, taking a big breath and then roar
Roar.
out your breath. And again,
Super
when we
cute.
talk about creating things for kids to latch onto, this
Mm-hmm.
is so effective at helping kids learn how to do this breathing technique, right? Because one, they're being guided with a voice.
Mm-hmm.
They have some light weight around their neck. They're feeling safe, and then they're able to practice this breathing technique that is also about fun, right? Because if we can't make breathing fun, kids are not going to want to do it, right? And so everything we think about is how can we make this fun? How can we make this interactive so that kids can learn to use these techniques in their
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day life?
And I think an important point that I've learned over the years from occupational therapists that I've worked with is that a lot of these techniques you don't teach in the moment. You don't teach
Mhm.
when kids are dysregulated. You teach it in a fun, proactive way when everyone is like at an optimal learning level and their body's calm. Uh,
That's great. I'd love to expand upon that. We use a
yeah.
watered down version of PBIS, right, to talk about this. So when we train caregivers and teachers, the first thing we do is we put up a stoplight and we say green, yellow, red. If a child is in a emotional state or in a meltdown, what do you think that equates to on a stoplight?
Hmm.
Red, right? Meaning, is this a good time to practice breathing with a child? Absolutely not, right? And so we want to teach the caregiver and the educator to use that stoplight for themselves. I
Yeah.
start every single one of my trainings with this question. How do you feel when somebody asks you to calm down?
Horrible. You get defensive
Horrible,
and
right,
mad
Tara? Yet, how many educators, myself included, how many parents, myself included, have ever asked a kid to calm down?
all the time in
All
some
the time.
form, in
Right,
some
in
way.
some form, right? Whether you're saying those words exactly or you're like, take a deep breath, right?
Yeah.
So that means the same thing when a kid's in a red emotional state, right? Meaning in a full meltdown. And so we
Hmm.
talk a lot about how the motor learning theory model tells us, right, those 1,000 reps for something to become cognitive. But does that mean when they're upset? Absolutely not. So you do need to find that time when kids are in a calm state. They can be having lots of fun, but it has to be a pleasant, happy thing in order for us to be able to count it towards learning this skill. And on top of it, we need teachers, educators, caregivers to not ask the question, can you calm down right now?
Yeah.
Because we all know how that makes us feel.
That's a super good point. And I think uh, what you're kind of talking, well, first of all, I love that you mentioned that the green, yellow, red is not for the kids, it's for the adults. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a great visual way for adults to kind of remember it, a little
Mhm.
cue for us. And then I love how, as you were talking, it reminded me of co-regulation. We have to start with co-regulation. We're modeling, we're showing, and if you're really using co-regulation, you're not going to be telling a child to calm down. You're going to be supporting them. If they don't want you nearby, you can be on the ground at their level, a little further away, just modeling calm and being a calm presence near them.
I totally agree. And, one of the things I talk a lot about in my training is that as an educator, how often do you actually sit in your own calm corner in a classroom? And I ask educators this all the time. And one, educators are doing too much with not enough time and not enough support.
For
So I'll start with
sure.
that. And now I want to add something to their already long list. But the next time an educator is upset, imagine if they sat in the calm corner.
Yeah.
They modeled a breathing technique in the environment that we want kids to do it in, right? Kids
Hmm.
need modeling. And the same goes, by the way, for parents and caregivers. We need caregivers to model these same techniques at home, right? If I get really upset as a parent and I go sit down in my calm corner and then I practice a breathing technique and I show my daughter
Hmm.
how that's supposed to work, that is very different than just also talking about it. So
Yeah.
I think one of the most important forms of co-regulation is also modeling behavior. And then on top of that, I want to teach a breathing technique that we do a lot. It's called buddy breathing. Um, I do find that for some neurodivergent kids, it can require physical touch. So it is not for all. There is a way to use it with a poster. So to
Yeah.
remove physical touch, I'll grab that in a second. We're going to pretend this white hand, for those of you watching on video, is not my hand. That's why I created this. So it's different visual. This is my hand and this is my friend's hand. And we take hand breathing, which is our core breathing technique, and we combine it to do it with somebody else. So I would take my finger and I would trace the fingers on my friend's hand, and we're going to do it all now together. We trace up and we breathe in, and then as we trace down, we breathe out. So
This is
I
so
would take
simple. I love it.
so simple. And then you would take, now this other hand would come to my hand, and now they would do it on my hand. So they're tracing my fingers. And we're taking breaths together. So for a neurotypical kid, this can work really well because it's not only co-regulation, it's breathing together and it incorporates physical touch. For a neurodivergent kid, this is how we modify it. I'm going to grab a poster, and on this poster, there is a hand that we use for hand breathing. So we would ask a neurodivergent kid sometimes to use a pencil or a pen and to trace on
Mm.
somebody else's hand or on a poster of a hand how to do the breathing technique here. One of
Yeah.
the things that we really love to do is actually have kids cut out hands, decorate them, and tape them to their desk, because then they can do tracing of another hand on their own desk or can visualize it using a pen or a pencil.
I love that. And Sarah, I think one way I just think of my young students who have
Yeah.
very deep interests in certain things, like they could decorate with things they love, like Paw
Hmm.
Patrol characters or Coco Melon characters. They could glue on little
Right. They can
pictures.
make it about them, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like a
Yeah.
way to like share your sense of self through this
Yeah.
project. It's something we really like to do with classrooms. Very effective.
I love it. I love it. Oh, these ideas are so, so awesome. And we talked about Bloomy, we talked about the weighted calm caterpillar. What
Yeah.
does when you're talking about your kits, do you sell those? Can people buy them? What do those look like?
Sure. So we sell our kits with either a Call Me or a Rory. So Call Me being the caterpillar, Rory being the lion. We do not sell any kits with Bloomy. That is an add-on, but all of our
Hmm.
kits come with a meditation cushion, which you can see here,
Oh yeah.
a breathing ball, which you can see here to
Oh,
practice taking deep breaths, and either a classroom guide, which includes our supplementary curriculum to be embedded into classrooms, or a parent guide, which I will show you here. And this is a parent caregiver guide. It takes the teacher one and really just change it for how to implement at home versus in a school setting, but still follows the same evidence-based curriculum inside that guide for caregivers and parents. And then it can include a variety of posters and books. And we have the opportunity for people to like kind of customize what it is they're looking for. A lot of
yeah.
schools that we work with, they decide exactly what goes into their kit.
I love this because a kit like this can go to any class. So
Yep.
you've probably heard Sarah say a lot today, neurotypical or neurodivergent. This isn't just for autistic kids. This is for anybody. And actually, some of the things that you're doing, you're like, we might have to modify this to, limit touch if there's a neurodivergent child that doesn't like to be touched. And so you kind of have this built-in being able to modify and adjust if needed. And when Sarah and I were talking prior to hitting record here, we talked about some special work that she did in Uvalde?
You
Did
got
I say it
it.
right?
Yeah.
Texas, after the school shooting. Can you
Yes,
tell us about that?
for sure. We had the opportunity this January to go to Uvalde and meet with all the guidance counselors in the Uvalde school district. Um, we talked with them about how they were implementing different techniques into classrooms to manage emotions. And one of the things that we were able to do was provide calm corner kits for their schools, for their classrooms. Not all schools across the United States have calm corners in their classrooms, and that's something we really want to help change.
Hmm.
So we were able to give them Calm Corner kits and then equip their guidance counselors and their teachers with the skills to begin implementing this. Because when we think about where Calm Caterpillar started and then the kids in Uvalde,
Hmm.
the one thing that comes to mind is adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
And ACEs, which is, has become more common in the educational world than I ever could have imagined, is really the thing we're trying to combat, right?
Yeah.
ACEs lead to chronic stress, a version of cortisol bath that really can equate to time off of your life expectancy. And one of the only ways to mitigate adverse childhood experiences is to do chronic stress prevention, which is mindfulness, which is breathing, which is learning to manage your emotions and your feelings. And so I am a firm believer that we need to incorporate mindfulness into all areas of our education because there are kids who are experiencing ACEs, whether it's in Uvalde or somewhere else every day. And
Hmm.
mindfulness is easy to implement when done correctly. It is always available to you because you always have your breath. And it is the one thing that sustains us all day long. Without our breath, we don't exist. And
Yeah.
so it's really important to remember, right? I always try to remind myself we are trying to combat adverse childhood experiences. We are trying to mitigate those effects. And the kids in Uvalde are people who we think of who are really struggling with adverse childhood experiences. And how can we help them?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up adverse childhood experiences or ACEs. We learned about that at the early childhood level at the last district I worked in. And if someone doesn't know what you're talking about, I think you kind of explained it, but can you explain it in a nutshell? And we can
Sure.
link something in the show notes to get more
Yeah.
information if people don't know.
For sure. So adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, it's a way to identify what someone's past has contributed to their current state. An ACE or one of the individual experiences each represent a point, and it's a screening tool we use to identify how many adverse childhood experiences somebody has. For example, having an ACE score of 3 or more is actually equal to 10 years off of your expected life.
Wow.
So Kaiser Permanente led the longest longitudinal study in the United States on ACEs. So we should link that in this so people
Yeah.
can look up about ACEs. An example of ACEs could be living with an alcoholic parent, a parent who is incarcerated, home insecurity, food insecurity, abuse, physical, sexual, experiencing a mass casualty, a mass shooting
Mhm.
event. Um, I think divorce is also considered an adverse childhood experience. Smoking, living with a smoker is an adverse childhood experience. The whole list is available in the
Yeah.
study. And it has become very common here in Cincinnati in particular for us, for the schools to be conducting ACE screens on a lot of the students. And so we do always take that lens. There's a really great organization here called the Joining Forces for Children. It's out of Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which is the #1 children's hospital in America, actually. And it's all about combating the effect of ACEs in our local
Mm.
community. And so that is why we were really taught to bring that lens to our work. So very grateful for the people at Joining Forces who really have brought that to the forefront of the conversation here in Cincinnati. And honestly, I've been traveling around the country speaking this year, and I would say everywhere I go, everybody knows what ACEs are, and that really just speaks to how important they are to understand so we can combat this issue.
Well, that makes me think too of how many autistic adults now have shared that compliance-based methods to teach them when they were younger were traumatic. And
Mhm.
to keep that in mind when a lot of us talk about compassion over compliance, especially when it comes to challenging behavior and things like that. So, that could in the future come into play as part of the ACEs. The other thing I wanted to say is just thank you so much for your work in Uvalde because I think the nation's heart was broken again when that school shooting happened, and just really important work. And thanks for being there in the aftermath to help take care of these kids and like you're saying with the ACEs, try to mitigate and help the long-term effects that can come out of situations like that, the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. It had to have been hard
Yeah,
just to be there.
definitely.
But
Yeah.
so, oh, is there anything I'm missing about what you have to offer? You work a lot with Head Start, you work with school districts. Let's say someone said, "Oh my gosh, I would love to work with Sarah and get a calming kit in my classroom or district at the district level, maybe." How would they get a hold of you?
That's a great question, Tara. So you can either fill out a form on our website, thecalmcaterpillar.com. You can contact us through our website, but I'll also share my email address on this podcast. It's
Okay.
sarah@thecalmcaterpillar.com. If you have a question or want to understand more, feel free to reach out to me. We work with schools every day all across the country, and I'd love to hear what you're up to and how you might need help.
I love this, Sarah. Oh, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I can't wait to work with you more in the future because you're offering such an important and awesome service. So thank you.
Thank you, Tara. I really appreciate it.